During the month of December, human beings are biologically hardwired to seek tribal connection. When an individual actively decides to lock themselves away while the rest of society gathers, they immediately label it as protecting their peace. However, clinical behavioral psychology reveals a catastrophic reality. When you deliberately isolate during periods of mass social gathering, your nervous system isn't resting. It is executing a severe maladaptive trauma response. This extreme holiday isolation is not restful. It is a self-imposed invisible prison that is quietly destroying your cognitive baseline. Right now, millions of people are preparing to spend Christmas alone, fully convinced they are practicing high-level emotional intelligence and self-care. But in reality, they are mathematically manufacturing their own psychological fragility. If you do not understand the exact neurochemical collapse happening inside your brain when you voluntarily isolate during the holidays, you will permanently lose your cognitive ability to handle interpersonal friction. The modern wellness industry has sold you a very comfortable lie about solitude. And today, we are going to clinically dissect the devastating biological cost of your holiday isolation. For thousands of years of human evolutionary history, winter was the ultimate test of physical and psychological survival. During periods of extreme cold and resource scarcity, tribal connection was never a luxury. It was an absolute biological mandate. The primitive human brain is hardwired to seek out the safety of the group when the environment becomes harsh. Therefore, when you actively suppress this primal urge and choose to spend the holidays entirely alone, you are intentionally short-circuiting a fundamental survival mechanism. You tell yourself that you are simply avoiding the stress of forced family interactions, the superficiality of office parties, and the exhausting financial pressure of the season. But your amygdala, the threat detection center of your central nervous system, interprets this sudden, deliberate isolation as a signal of tribal exile. It assumes you have been cast out of the group. Consequently, it begins to slowly flood your bloodstream with baseline levels of cortisol, keeping you in a state of low-grade, chronic physiological stress that you mistakenly identify as inner peace. Listen to me very carefully, because the neuroplastic window to reverse this biological decay is closing rapidly as the holidays approach. Every single day you rely on this fake emotional safety to escape the friction of December, your brain physically prunes the neural pathways required for assertiveness, social navigation, and emotional resilience. The psychological damage compounds hour by hour. If you look away or close this video right now, you are consciously choosing to remain a voluntary victim of your own fragile nervous system, guaranteeing that your isolation will eventually become neurologically irreversible. You must understand the exact mechanics of this psychological trap today before your invisible prison is sealed shut. How does holiday isolation destroy your nervous system? Let us clinically examine what actually happens to your central nervous system when you lock yourself inside this invisible prison. In the fields of complex trauma recovery and behavioral psychology, we study a devastating phenomenon known as sensory deprivation. When you completely remove yourself from unpredictable social dynamics to purportedly protect your energy, you are literally starving your brain of necessary psychological stress. Human relationships are inherently messy, unpredictable, and friction-heavy. Your brain absolutely requires this exact friction to maintain its emotional immune system, in the exact same way your physical muscles require heavy gravitational resistance to prevent atrophy. When you spend Christmas alone, you artificially eliminate all external variables. You control the temperature, you control the noise level, and you control the information input. You create a highly sterile emotional environment that rapidly destroys your natural psychological defenses. Because you have successfully eliminated all external friction from your holiday experience, your biological baseline for emotional tolerance violently drops to absolute zero. This means that eventually even the slightest social inconvenience, a delayed text message, a minor disagreement at your workplace in January, or a slightly critical look from a stranger, will trigger a massive adrenaline spike and a full-blown physiological panic attack. You have not achieved inner peace. You have mathematically manufactured extreme emotional fragility. You have trained your nervous system to become functionally allergic to other human beings. This exposes the dark, painful truth about the people who constantly brag about spending the holidays alone on social media. Their emotional intelligence is fundamentally stunted. They have completely confused the clinical concept of emotional regulation with the cowardly act of emotional avoidance. Are you protecting your peace or masking trauma? You must ask yourself a brutal, uncomfortable question right now. Are you actually setting healthy boundaries, or are you simply using maladaptive isolation to hide from your own profound insecurities? Modern pop psychology has given you a highly weaponized vocabulary to justify your chronic lack of social courage. You call it a boundary when you decline every invitation to a holiday dinner. You call it protecting your peace when you completely avoid your family members because their political views or personal questions make you slightly uncomfortable. But true, clinical boundaries require active, highly uncomfortable confrontation. Real boundaries require you to plant your feet, look your family members directly in the eye, and verbally enforce a strict rule of engagement while fully enduring their immediate emotional reaction. Retreating to your apartment, locking the door, and turning off your phone is not a boundary. It is an escape hatch for a nervous system that is simply too weak to handle the heat of human interaction. By refusing to engage with the holiday chaos, you strip your brain of its ability to self-soothe in the direct presence of danger. You become entirely dependent on environmental control to feel safe. You begin to micromanage your social circles throughout the entire year, curating your friendships so aggressively that anyone who intellectually challenges your worldview is immediately discarded as toxic. This is not emotional maturity. This is covert narcissism disguised as self-care. You are demanding that the entire world conform to your extreme emotional fragility, and when it inevitably doesn't, you retreat further into your sensory deprivation tank. You are constructing a psychological echo chamber where your own confirmation bias becomes your only source of absolute truth, entirely blinding you to your own avoidant behavioral patterns. You will absolutely never hear this clinical reality from mainstream online therapists or self-help gurus, because keeping you fragile, agreeable, and constantly seeking validation through isolation is the backbone of a $4.4 trillion wellness economy. This is the carefully hidden behavioral architecture that the top 1% of elite communicators understand intimately, while the masses hide behind their screens watching holiday movies alone. If you do not master this exclusive biological reality in the next 2 minutes, you will remain highly profitable prey for an industry that actively monetizes your loneliness. You simply cannot afford to miss how your desire for comfort is actively destroying your social leverage right now. How does the wellness industry weaponize loneliness? Let us dissect how the modern wellness industry actively weaponizes your loneliness for profit. They sell you the concept of the solo date, the silent retreat, and the independent holiday as the ultimate markers of self-love and independence. They convince you that you are too highly evolved to deal with the trivial drama of a family Christmas. But in high CPM environments, corporate boardrooms, high-stakes negotiations, and elite social hierarchies, this chronic inability to handle the chaotic friction of a simple family dinner is recognized as a massive biological liability. High-value individuals constantly observe your behavior. When they see that you cannot even tolerate the minor annoyances of a holiday gathering without completely withdrawing into isolation, they instantly categorize you as someone who lacks the baseline nervous system regulation required to handle true power, wealth, or responsibility. If you fracture under the weight of an awkward conversation with a relative, how will you ever navigate the intense psychological pressure of building an empire? The reality is that your holiday isolation is keeping you socially invisible and financially stagnant. Business networking, wealth generation, and social mobility all rely on one fundamental currency: interpersonal friction. You must be able to sit in a room full of chaotic, unpredictable people and remain completely immovable. By fleeing the scene before the interaction even begins, you surrender all of your social leverage. You leave a massive power vacuum. The people who genuinely cared about you are left confused and hurt, eventually moving on. Meanwhile, the aggressive or manipulative personalities in your family or social circle use your sudden withdrawal to rewrite the narrative, easily labeling you as arrogant, unreliable, or unstable. Your absence becomes their greatest weapon, and you willingly handed it to them under the absolute delusion of protecting your peace. Why does avoiding family dinners make you fragile? This brings us to the ultimate clinical attack on your ego. Avoiding family dinners and holiday gatherings makes you emotionally fragile because it physically reinforces the subconscious belief that you are simply not capable of defending your own identity. Every single time you choose the safety of your empty living room over the friction of the gathering, you are sending a deeply damaging neurological signal to your own brain. I am too weak to exist in that space. Over time, this repeated biological surrender completely erodes your baseline self-esteem. You become numb, mistaking your clinical depression and severe lack of assertiveness for some form of enlightened, stoic solitude. But true stoicism is never the absence of chaos. True stoicism is being fully exposed to the absolute chaos of a holiday gathering, surrounded by friction, noise, and potential conflict, yet remaining completely calm and internally regulated. What you are doing is the exact biological opposite. You are fleeing the battlefield before the fight even begins and proudly calling yourself a victor. You are confusing the peace of a graveyard with the peace of a master. The primitive human brain simply cannot differentiate between actual peace and the suppressed terror of a confrontation you ran away from. The biochemical results coursing through your veins are exactly the same: systemic inflammation and a devastating collapse of your dopamine receptors. The mathematical cost of your inaction today is absolute and unforgiving. Your cowardly behavior is actively destroying your social capital and your mental resilience at this exact second. Every single holiday gathering you avoid creates a compounded psychological debt that you will be forced to pay back with severe anxiety and total loss of status in the future. You have less than a minute to completely reprogram this cognitive failure before your invisible prison is sealed shut. Your weakness becomes a permanent personality trait, and your respect is entirely erased from the social matrix. Listen closely to the final blueprint. How do you rebuild cognitive resilience during holidays? You have to break the biological code immediately. You must forcefully stop using therapy buzzwords to mask your profound fear of exposure. If you want to develop impenetrable psychological resilience and command respect in every room you enter, you must willingly step back into the arena of social friction. You must stop running away from the holidays. Authentic human connection is inherently messy, emotionally draining, and dangerously unpredictable. That is the necessary, non-negotiable price of admission to a meaningful, high-status life. You need to start exposing yourself to microdoses of social discomfort immediately. This is the clinical application of exposure therapy. The next time you're invited to a holiday gathering, do not look for the exit. Accept the invitation. When the conversation gets tense or someone makes a passive-aggressive remark, force your feet to remain firmly planted on the floor. Maintain heavy, unblinking eye contact. Notice the massive spike of adrenaline in your chest, the heat in your face, and the primal urge to retreat, and simply let it exist without reacting to it. Stay in the fire, speak your truth slowly, clearly, and without a single apology. Train your amygdala that social friction does not equal physical death. Teach your nervous system that you are a competent, dangerous adult who can handle the heat without collapsing. This is the only legitimate path to true emotional intelligence. Anything else is just a highly marketable delusion sold to you by people who want to keep you weak. The psychological prison of holiday isolation is absolutely real, but now you possess the exact clinical blueprint to dismantle its walls brick by brick. You are no longer blind to your own biological cowardice, which means you no longer have any excuse to remain a voluntary victim of your own fear. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to master your primal psychology before the covert manipulators in your circle use your behavioral blind spots to completely destroy you. Check the resources in the description to rebuild your cognitive framework from the ground up and start operating like the top 1% of human behavior experts. Stop lying to yourself about your peace. You are not protecting your energy, you are hiding in a sterile cage. Step out of the invisible prison, face the friction, and reclaim your biological dominance today.